Welcome to our deep dive into why saying I do is becoming more like I don't these days.
You could say that, yeah.
We're going to take a look at why marriage rates are going down in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got a bunch of research on this.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, it's not just about celebrity gossip.
No, not at all. We're going to uncover a whole bunch of factors like social and economic and get this even technological stuff.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Our source talks about the Kardashians.
Ah, yes.
And to be honest, their relationship stuff is like everywhere you look.
It's true.
I mean, they even talk about having kids without being married.
Right.
So does this all mean something bigger is changing in our culture, or they're just kind of unusual?
Well, think of it this way. They're more of a symptom than the actual cause. Yeah, they're like a reflection of what's already happening, not the thing that's making it happen.
So they're like a mirror.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what's the data actually saying? Is
Yeah.
this a real decline, or is the media just making a big deal out of nothing?
Well, the numbers tell a pretty clear story.
Okay.
Between 1978 and 2018, the number of 18 to 34-year-olds who got married went way down.
Wow.
It dropped from 59% all the way down to 29%.
Whoa, 29%.
Yeah.
That's like almost half.
Huge drop.
And you know what makes this even more interesting?
What's that?
Our research says that the COVID-19 pandemic might have made things even worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like throwing another problem into an already messy situation.
Yeah, you can say that. COVID-19 brought all this instability to the economy and people were losing their jobs.
Right,
Relationships were getting stressed.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's no wonder that a lot of people felt like marriage was just completely out of reach.
So besides all the craziness from the pandemic, what are the bigger reasons behind this drop in marriage rates?
Well, one thing the research talks about is something called emerging adulthood.
Emerging adulthood.
Yeah, it's like a new stage of life where young people are taking longer to settle into those traditional roles we're used to. Like, think about it. They're more focused on exploring different things first. Their careers, their education, just figuring out who they are.
Yeah.
And they're not in a rush to commit to things like marriage.
So instead of running to get married, they're kind of taking their time to figure things out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense in today's world.
Well, we have so many more career options than before, and getting a good education is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Plus, technology connects us in ways we couldn't have imagined just a few decades ago. It's totally natural that people don't feel the same pressure to get married young like they used to.
So speaking of technology, what about dating apps?
Oh, yeah.
Are they making it easier or harder to find someone to marry?
Well, they're definitely shaking things up, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they've gotten so popular.
They have.
And they give you this huge pool of potential partners.
It's endless.
Right. Which can be amazing for finding that perfect match.
Yeah.
But it also creates what the research calls a paradox of choice.
Paradox of choice. Okay, I've definitely felt that. Like sometimes having too many options can be like too much.
Yeah, it can be paralyzing, right?
Is that kind of what that paradox thing is about?
Exactly. When you have endless choices right there on your phone,
Right.
it's so easy to just keep swiping, always looking for someone better.
I get it.
It becomes harder to actually commit when you constantly see all these new possibilities.
It's like that with online shopping too. You just keep browsing and browsing.
Great analogy. And on top of all that, the research also points out that more people are living together before getting married.
Yeah.
Is that maybe connected to this whole emerging adulthood idea?
Possibly, right.
Yeah, a lot of couples see living together as a way to test things out before marriage.
Makes sense.
It's like a trial run.
Right.
You know, they can figure out what it's really like to live with each other and see if they're actually compatible before taking that big step.
So it's another way that young adults are putting off those traditional milestones.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this new stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
We've got endless choices on dating apps.
Right.
And this whole idea of testing the waters before jumping into marriage.
Yeah.
What other things are contributing to these lower marriage rates?
Yeah.
It feels like we're putting together a really complicated puzzle.
You're right. It is complicated.
Yeah.
And education is a big piece of that puzzle.
Okay.
But it's kind of a double-edged sword.
How so?
More people are going to college now,
Yeah.
especially women, which is amazing for them.
It is.
It gives them more power and more opportunities.
Education is so important.
It is. But some people argue that all that focus on education actually delays financial stability,
Yeah.
which a lot of people see as like a requirement for marriage.
That's interesting. What do you think about that trade-off?
Well, you bring up a good point. While education is super important, it often comes with a big price tag.
Yeah, those student loans.
Exactly. Student loan debt is a huge burden for lots of young people,
It,
and it makes it that much harder to reach that level of financial security that many people think you need before getting married and starting a family.
so it's like they're swapping one kind of pressure for another.
Yeah.
The pressure to get married is replaced by the pressure to succeed in this competitive job market and deal with all that student loan debt.
You got it. And that leads us to another really important factor, affordability in general.
Right?
It's not just about education, it's about how expensive everything is these days.
It is. Housing prices are crazy high,
I know.
and everything just seems to cost more.
It does.
How are young people even supposed to think about getting married and having a family when just paying for the basics is so hard?
That's a great question, and the research actually digs into that. The data shows that 41% of adults say that not being financially stable is a major reason why they're not married.
41%.
Yeah, that's from the Pew Research Center. I mean, think about it. Housing prices and car prices are way higher than they were 50 years ago. It's just plain harder for young adults today to have the same level of financial security that their parents or grandparents had.
It's like this perfect storm.
Yeah.
All these cultural changes, economic pressures, technological advancements, all happening at the same time.
You're totally picking up on how complicated this issue really is.
It is.
And it raises a big question.
Okay.
What happens in the long run if this trend of fewer people getting married keeps going?
Yeah.
Do all these individual choices end up having a bigger impact on society as a whole?
That's a great question.
It is.
Yeah, it really feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are.
I'm curious, is there anything else you found in the research that really stands out?
Yeah, there is actually.
Okay.
And it goes back to what we were talking about with education. You know, more and more women are going to college.
Right.
Which is great.
It is.
But it does have those ripple effects we talked about on money and relationships.
Right. The student loan thing's a big deal for sure. It's awesome that more women are going to college. But it does add that financial pressure. But is it really just about money, though?
It's actually bigger than just personal finances.
Oh.
The research talks about how all these women getting college degrees is changing the workplace.
Interesting.
Yeah, it even gives a statistic.
Oh, yeah.
In 2019, women were almost half of all the workers in America.
Wow.
And about half of those women had a college degree.
So this isn't just about what individuals are choosing anymore.
Right.
It's like changing the whole way we work.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
It is. And this shift in how men and women relate to each other at work is definitely affecting how people think about marriage.
Makes sense.
Like those old school roles where women stayed home and men were the breadwinners.
Yeah.
Those are way less common now.
It's like we're getting rid of the old rules about relationships and making up new ones as we go.
I like that. And one of the new rules seems to be about waiting longer to get married.
Yeah.
The research says that as more women focus on education and careers, they're also choosing to wait on getting married and even having kids.
That makes sense. It's like they're putting their own personal and professional growth first before settling down.
Yeah, it's like they're rearranging their priorities.
Totally. Is there data on that?
There is actually, get this, between 2016 and 2018, the number of working women who decided to freeze their eggs
Oh, wow.
more than doubled.
Really?
It went from 6% to 17%.
That's huge.
It is. It shows that women are really taking charge of when they want to have kids, which obviously affects their decisions about marriage and family.
For sure. So we've got women getting more education, entering the workforce in bigger numbers, and controlling their reproductive choices. What about the men, though?
Yeah.
How are they handling all these changes?
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The research points out that as more and more women go to college, men are actually on track to become the minority on college campuses.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, it's true. The U.S. Department of Education even predicts that by 2026, 57% of college students will be women.
Wow. That's a huge shift. So the traditional roles in education are like flipping.
Yeah, it is.
Heck
It
yeah.
makes you wonder what this means for the future.
It does. It changes how men see themselves, their careers, and their relationships.
Totally.
That's a whole new set of rules to figure out. So what does all this mean for the future of marriage?
Right.
With everything changing so fast, are we heading towards a world where marriage is like a rare thing?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
The research doesn't give us all the answers,
Okay.
but it does give us some things to think about.
So what kind of insights does it offer about where marriage is headed?
Well, it suggests that even though fewer people are getting married,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean they're giving up on long-term relationships completely. Remember, more people are living together now.
Right, that testing ground. hygiene.
Exactly. It's becoming a more normal way for couples to be together.
So maybe marriage isn't disappearing, it's just changing. Like instead of being the automatic thing to do, it's becoming more of a deliberate choice.
That's a really important point. It could be that marriage is shifting into something more intentional, something people think about carefully, instead of just doing it because it's what society expects.
So it's like people are saying, we're not against marriage, but we want to do it our own way.
Exactly.
So they're not feeling pressured to get married by a certain age. They're taking their time to find the right person and build a strong relationship.
Yeah.
It's less about checking off a box and more about making a real commitment.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even though marriage rates are going down, they're not going away completely.
Right.
There are still plenty of people who value marriage and see it as an important goal. It's not like it's one way or the other.
So it's more like a range of choices.
Yeah.
People are finding different ways to have love and commitment. Some might choose marriage, while others might be happy with living together or other arrangements.
You got it. And this just shows that there is no one right answer to this whole question of marriage and relationships.
Right.
It's complex, and there are lots of different perspectives and choices.
We've talked about a lot here. Women changing the workplace, men maybe becoming the minority in college, and marriage itself possibly evolving.
Was there anything else in the research that really stuck out to you?
You know, there is one more thing.
Okay.
And I think it connects everything we've been talking about.
I'm listening.
It's about the American dream.
The American dream. How does that fit in with all this talk about marriage?
Yeah.
I always thought that was more about like the house with the white picket fence.
Right, the traditional family.
Yeah.
Well, that was the classic picture. But the research says that the whole idea of the American dream is changing.
Okay. I'm all ears. How is it changing?
In the past, achieving the American dream meant hitting certain milestones by a certain age.
Like what?
Like having a stable job, a house, getting married, having kids.
Yeah, usual stuff. It was a pretty straightforward path. But for a lot of young people today, it's not so much about those things anymore. It's more about feeling fulfilled personally, discovering who they are, pursuing their passions.
So it's shifting from like focusing on the end goal to focusing on the journey itself.
Exactly.
It's about creating a life that feels authentic and meaningful.
Right.
Whether or not it includes those traditional milestones.
Exactly. And this shift in values directly affects how people see marriage.
I see.
If being happy and fulfilled is what matters most, then settling down and getting married might not fit into that picture, at least not right away.
Yeah, it's like people are rewriting the stories of their own lives.
Yeah.
They're choosing their own adventures. And marriage isn't necessarily the main event anymore.
Right. It's about finding a path that aligns with their own values and what they want to achieve.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And this connects back to that idea of emerging adulthood.
It does.
If young people are spending more time exploring different options, it makes sense that they might wait longer to make those big commitments like marriage.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this new definition of the American dream. We've got this longer period of emerging adulthood and all these economic and social pressures happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. So what's the final word? Is marriage doomed?
Doomed. No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
But it's definitely at a turning point. The research suggests that marriage might be becoming something different. It might be more about making a conscious choice.
Okay.
And being selective about who you marry.
So not just following the traditional path.
Right. It's more about finding the right person at the right time.
So less of a default setting and more of a carefully thought out decision.
Exactly. And remember, even though people might be waiting longer to get married, it doesn't mean they're ruling it out completely. Lots of people still see it as a meaningful commitment.
Right.
Even if it happens later in life.
Okay, so marriage is changing. It's adapting to all these shifts in society and culture. But what about the bigger picture?
Yeah.
We talked about Japan and their super-age society. Could that be what's in store for the U.S. with all these people not getting married?
That's a real concern that the research brings up.
Yeah.
With fewer marriages and fewer babies being born, the U.S. could end up facing the same problems as Japan.
Like what?
An aging population, more strain on social safety nets, and a shrinking workforce.
Kind of scary to think about.
It is something we need to be aware of as we deal with these changes in our population.
It's a lot to consider, and it paints a pretty serious picture of what the future might look like. But I guess knowing about these trends is the first step towards finding solutions.
Exactly. It's not about freaking people out.
Hmm.
It's about having honest conversations about what could happen
Right.
and working together to build a society that supports people and families, no matter what their relationship status is.
That's a good point. It's not about forcing people to get married.
Right.
It's about making sure everyone has the resources and support to make the choices that are best for them.
Exactly. And those choices might include marriage, living together, being a single parent, or anything else that works for them.
It's about having options.
Right. The important thing is to create a society that's inclusive and supportive of everyone.
Yeah.
And recognizes that there are many different ways to be happy and fulfilled.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
Who knew that all these people not getting married could be connected to so many different parts of our society?
I know, right?
From the American dream to the changing roles of women and men.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's also a little overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but I think the main thing to remember is that we're in the middle of a huge social shift.
Mm-hmm.
The old ways of thinking about relationships and family are changing,
Yeah.
and it's up to us to figure out how to handle these changes with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to adapt.
I like that empathy, understanding, and adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great principles to guide us as we move forward in a world that's constantly changing.
They are. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought.
Okay.
If marriage really is changing,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the future of love, commitment, and family?
Mm.
How do we redefine those things to reflect our changing values and priorities?
It's a big question.
It is. There are no easy answers, but it's a conversation we need to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great question for our listeners to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the decline of marriage.
Right.
It's about what comes next.
Exactly.
What new kinds of relationships will we see?
Yeah.
How do we support each other in this new world?
It is a new world.
There's a lot to ponder as we figure out this uncharted territory of love and connection.
There is. The future is wide open.
It is.
And it's up to each of us to shape it in a way that reflects what we value and what we hope for.